Welcome to episode 16 of this series on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at some key quotations which you can use to discuss certain themes.
It's important that you find your own quotations as well as these ones, but paying attention to how each of the chosen quotations is used will help you make better choices when picking your own.
We're going to move through key quotations on the following 4 subjects: use of Paradise Lost, light and knowledge, monstrosity, and the Sublime. Let's start with Paradise Lost.
Paradise Lost isn't mentioned until quite some way into the novel, but its influence stretches throughout the rest of the text. It's a formative text for the monster, and is responsible for much of his worldview.
Our key quote regarding Paradise Lost revolves around the monster's first encounter with the text. We'll listen to it first in full, and then break it down into its useful segments.
But Paradise Lost excited different and far deeper emotions. I read it, as I had read the other volumes which had fallen into my hands, as a true history. It moved every feeling of wonder and awe that the picture of an omnipotent God warring with his creatures was capable of exciting. I often referred the several situations, as their similarity struck me, to my own. Like Adam, I was apparently united by no link to any other being in existence. But his state was far different from mine in every other respect. He had come forth from the hands of God a perfect creature, happy and prosperous, guarded by the especial care of his Creator. He was allowed to converse with and acquire knowledge from beings of a superior nature. But I was wretched, helpless, and alone. Many times I considered Satan as the fitter emblem of my condition. For often, like him, when I viewed the bliss of my protectors, the bitter gall of envy rose within me.
There's a lot going on in this segment, so let's go through it piece by piece. That the text excites different and far deeper emotions than the previous books in The Monster is a quick and obvious clue that this is the most important text to him. Next, we are reminded that he has read this tale of the Devil's Fall as a true history. This is important because it links with other themes we'll speak about later: truth and reliability. It also shows us that the monster is naive, mistaking a fictional text for true history.
Paradise Lost is also important to the text because of the links the monster makes between himself and Adam. I was apparently united by no link to any other being in existence. They are both the first of their kind. But whereas Adam was guarded by the especial care of his Creator, the monster is wretched, helpless, and alone. Adam is, in theory, the person the monster wants to be, but instead he begins to draw links between himself and the devil, because, like Satan, when I viewed the bliss of my protectors, the bitter gall of envy rose within me.
So, with this quote we can show that Paradise Lost is a text which the monster uses to understand the world, and as a result, his place in the world. It also makes us, the readers, reposition our understanding of the events up to that moment. Frankenstein becomes less sympathetic in our eyes as we come to understand the monster's abandonment better.
Next, let's talk about light and knowledge in the novel. Light is linked with knowledge from the very beginning, when Walton, in his first letters home, asks, "What may not be expected in a country of eternal light?" Immediately, that idea of illumination and revelation is put forward as a positive and important step. At the same time, light is associated with the divine and celestial. Walton again refers to the celestial observations he will make as he travels further north. This is intended to make the reader question whether the knowledge he pursues is meant for mankind, or whether it should be reserved for gods.
Nowhere is this more true than the question of death. Frankenstein is obsessed with the idea of shining a light across boundaries into unknown territories, and in his eyes there's no greater boundary than death. Frankenstein heavily references light when he talks about his desire to better understand life and death.
Life and death appeared to me ideal bounds, which I should first break through and pour a torrent of light into our dark world.
He goes further, stating that a new species would bless me as its creator and source, essentially placing himself in the position of a god-creator and again linking the idea of the divine closely with advanced knowledge.
The entire novel is a question about knowledge, and whether there are some questions we as humans should never answer. Moments of tragedy often occur in the darkness throughout this novel, and that's a clear warning from the author that the quest for knowledge is inherently dangerous.
Monstrosity, and the creation of the monster, is one of the direct outcomes of Frankenstein's experiments. Monstrosity as a theme is one of the most common in Gothic texts, and Frankenstein's creation is a perfect study of the theme. But we've spoken a lot about the monster throughout the text, and there are plenty of quotes in previous chapters regarding him. Instead, for this key quote, we'll take something from the innocent Justine about her captors. In this quote, she talks about her treatment at the hands of her jailers. "Ever since I was condemned, my confessor has besieged me. He threatened and menaced, until I almost began to think that I was the monster that he said I was. He threatened excommunication and hellfire in my last moments, if I continued obdurate. Dear lady, I had none to support me. All looked on me as a wretch doomed to ignominy and perdition. What could I do? In an evil hour I subscribed to a lie, and now only am I truly miserable."
This section is interesting because it asks a question about monstrosity in general, rather than the monstrosity of Frankenstein's creation. In this segment, a character who we know to be innocent is forced to admit wrongdoing because a group of humans believe she did it. This is an illustration for us readers how a person's perspective can be false, and asks a question about whether we can really consider our own perception as true and absolute. This also acts as preparation for Frankenstein's encounter with his creation later in the novel, and opens us up to the idea that the monster is not the beast Frankenstein has portrayed him as.
Next, let's talk about the sublime. As another common theme in the Gothic genre, sublime experiences are present throughout the novel. For Frankenstein, the sublime often serves as a calming influence on him, but for us readers, it's a marker that something darker and more upsetting is on the horizon. Take, for example, this section in Chapter 9, when he returns to his childhood home and talks about his walks in the hills.
These sublime and magnificent scenes afforded me the greatest consolation that I was capable of receiving. They elevated me from all littleness of feeling, and although they did not remove my grief, they subdued and tranquilized it.
A few moments after Frankenstein describes the calming, sublime experience of nature, the monster appears. It's as if he is invoked by Frankenstein's surroundings, and described with similar language.
I perceived, as the shape came nearer, sight tremendous and abhorred, that it was the wretch whom I had created. I trembled with rage and horror, resolving to wait his approach, and then close with him in mortal combat. He approached. His countenance bespoke bitter anguish, combined with disdain and malignity, while its unearthly ugliness rendered it almost too horrible for human eyes.
Trembling, horror, and the difficulty for Frankenstein to comprehend him with human eyes all closely tie the sublime natural world with the monster. When you're sourcing additional quotes, pay close attention to the way these two blend with one another.
These quotes are all useful, but there are plenty more in the text that you can use as well. Use our breakdown of the quotes in this episode as a base for your own analysis, and be sure to source quotes on each subject from throughout the text. where they're found in the novel will have an impact on their meaning as well as what they're talking about.
That's enough for this episode. Join us next time for the final episode, when we talk about how to take all the knowledge we've covered in this series and apply it in an exam.
See you next time.